My name is Mackenzie, and today I turn 27. After years of avoiding public celebrations, I finally gathered the courage to host my birthday at Rosewood Café, my safe haven in this town. The table is beautifully decorated with lavender and white flowers, and I'm surrounded by the people I trust most, well, those I think I can trust. Trust doesn't come easily to me anymore, not after what happened before. As I blow out my candles, I notice my mother Patricia leaning toward my brother Jason, whispering urgently, "While everyone's here, go and changed." Wait, what? Before I continue, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had a birthday surprise go horribly wrong. Planning this birthday celebration took a full month of meticulous preparation. I specifically chose Rosewood Café, not just because they make the best raspberry cheesecake in town, but because this place holds special meaning for me. It was my first job when I was 16, scrubbing dishes and learning to make lattes under Mrs. Garcia's patient guidance. The cafe still has that warm, inviting atmosphere, with its brick walls and fairy lights that made me feel safe during those turbulent teenage years. Mrs. Garcia, now in her 60s with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes, practically adopted me when I worked here. When I approached her about hosting my birthday, she immediately blocked off the entire back section and promised to handle all the decorations personally. True to her word, she transformed the space with lavender and white bunting, fresh flowers on every table, and fairy lights strung across the ceiling. She even remembered my favorite playlist, a mix of indie folk and throwback 90-second songs that always lifts my spirits. After my disastrous birthdays in recent years, I desperately needed this one to be different. On my 21st, Rachel, my supposed best friend since high school, thought it would be hilarious to read excerpts from my private journal to our entire friend group. Entries about my crush on her brother, my insecurities about my body, and my fears about the future, all laid bare for everyone to laugh at. I still remember standing there, humiliation burning through me, as her boyfriend Tyler recorded the whole thing on his phone. I lost most of my friends that night, not because they sided with Rachel, but because I couldn't bear to face them knowing what they'd heard. Then there was my 25th birthday, when my boyfriend of 3 years dumped me via text message, literally 45 minutes before our dinner reservation. The message simply read, "Can't do this anymore. Sorry, it's your birthday. Take care." I sat alone at that restaurant table for 2 hours, telling the waitstaff my date was running late until they started giving me those pitying looks that made me want to disappear into the floor. So for this birthday, I was determined to break the curse. My boyfriend Ethan promised to help make it special. We've only been together 8 months, but he's different, attentive, reliable, and understanding about my trust issues. When I showed him my carefully curated guest list, he didn't question why it was so short. I invited only people I truly trusted, Abigail, Nathan, and Danielle, from work colleagues, who had become friends over shared lunch breaks and late nights meeting deadlines. My mom, Patricia, and brother Jason, who, despite our complicated history, had always been there when it really mattered. And Stephanie, my rock, who flew in from Chicago just for this night. Stephanie was the only one who stood by me after the Rachel disaster, the one who helped me pick up the pieces after every heartbreak. Mrs. Garcia outdid herself with the cake 3 tiers of vanilla sponge, with raspberry filling decorated with fresh lavender sprigs, and a simple "Happy Birthday Mackenzie" in elegant script. No garish colors or over-the-top decorations, just understated elegance exactly how I wanted it. As everyone arrived, the atmosphere was perfect. Abigail brought her signature enthusiasm, immediately complimenting the decorations and snapping photos for her Instagram. Nathan arrived with a bottle of champagne and his warm, gentle smile. Danielle came bearing a beautifully wrapped gift, giving me a tight hug before finding her seat. Jason arrived next with his new girlfriend Brooke, whom I'd only met once before but seemed sweet and unpretentious. My mom arrived last, just as she always does, kissing my cheek and whispering, "Happy birthday, sweetheart," in my ear. For a moment, I felt that childhood sense of security wash over me, that feeling that everything was right in the world because my mom was there. Ethan texted that he was running 15 minutes late but promised to make it up to me. I tried not to let the slight disappointment show on my face as I greeted Stephanie, who had just walked in wearing the brightest smile. Everything was going according to plan. The cafe smelled like fresh pastries and coffee. The playlist had just shifted to my favorite Fleetwood Mac song. My closest friends and family were gathered around me, glasses raised in celebration. For the first time in years, I felt that maybe, just maybe, my birthday could be a happy occasion again. But then I caught my mother looking at her phone for the third time in 10 minutes, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she thought no one was watching, she leaned over to Jason and whispered something, her expression anxious. A familiar knot began to form in my stomach, that sense that something was off, that the perfect evening I had planned so carefully was about to unravel. I tried to ignore the twist of anxiety in my gut as I watched my mother check her phone again. Patricia had always been the poised one in our family, the woman who could host a dinner party for 12 while solving a work crisis and never letting her smile slip. Seeing her this distracted was unusual, and it immediately set off warning bells. "Is everything okay?" I asked, sliding into the seat beside her. "Of course, sweetie," she said, tucking her phone away too quickly. "Just checking in on Dad's flight. You know how he always forgets to update me when he lands." My father, divorced from my mother for 15 years, was currently on a business trip in Singapore and had sent his regrets about missing my birthday weeks ago. Her lie was so transparent it made my chest tighten. From across the table, Stephanie caught my eye, raising her eyebrows in silent question. I gave a small shrug in response, trying to communicate that I didn't know what was happening either. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan, running about 30 minutes late. "Big emergency at work. So sorry, babe, I'll make it up to you." The message sent me spiraling back to memories of Mark, my ex from 3 years ago, who was perpetually running late or dealing with work emergencies that I later discovered were actually rendezvous with his other girlfriend. Logically, I knew Ethan wasn't Mark. He'd never given me any reason not to trust him, but trauma doesn't always respond to logic. "Everything okay?" Stephanie asked, now at my side, while the others chatted among themselves. "Ethan's going to be a bit late," I said, forcing a smile. "Work stuff." Before Stephanie could respond, my mother abruptly stood up. "Excuse me, I need to make a quick call." She hurried toward the cafe's entrance, her phone already pressed to her ear. Jason looked uncomfortable, suddenly very interested in his water glass and avoiding my gaze entirely. When Brooke asked him a question, he answered distractedly, his eyes darting to the door where our mother had disappeared. Thankfully, Abigail chose that moment to pull me into a conversation about our upcoming work project, a marketing campaign for a local children's charity. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for a few minutes I managed to forget the growing unease. "This is for you," Danielle said, pushing a small, neatly wrapped package across the table. I couldn't wait until the official gift opening. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. The paper was thick and creamy, the kind that makes you want to write profound thoughts just so they can live on such beautiful pages. "I know you stopped journaling after." "Well, you know," Danielle said, softly referencing the Rachel incident, without actually mentioning it. "But I thought maybe it was time to start again." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, genuinely moved. The moment was interrupted when Mrs. Garcia appeared with a tray of appetizers, her famous stuffed mushrooms and bruschetta with homemade sourdough. "Eat up," she encouraged with her warm smile. "There's plenty more coming." As everyone reached for the food, I noticed Jason slipping outside. Curiosity and suspicion got the better of me, and I excused myself, following him at a distance. Through the cafe window, I could see him talking on his phone, his expression serious. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, just fragments. "Running late. She's going to be devastated if. No, mom's handling it. Just be here soon." My heart sank. Who was running late? What would devastate me? Was Ethan not coming at all? Was someone bringing bad news? The possibilities multiplied in my mind, each worse than the last. I returned to the party before Jason could spot me, plastering a smile on my face that felt brittle enough to crack. My mother returned shortly after, looking slightly more relaxed but still on edge. Jason remained outside. "Everything okay with your call?" I asked my mother, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh yes, just work nonsense that couldn't wait," she said with a wave of her hand. Another lie. My mother had retired from her accounting firm 2 years ago. As she set her phone down on the table, a notification lit up the screen. I couldn't help but glimpse the message preview. "Surprise is almost ready. Don't tell Mackenzie, or it'll." My stomach dropped. What surprise? And why did it feel like everyone was conspiring behind my back? Mrs. Garcia had outdone herself with the dinner setup. The long table was set with vintage china plates, crystal wine glasses, and silver cutlery that gleamed under the warm cafe lighting. Fresh flowers in small mason jars dotted the length of the table, and tea lights cast a gentle glow over everything. It looked like something from a magazine spread, exactly the kind of elegant, understated celebration I had dreamed of. Jason finally returned from outside and took his seat next to Brooke, who gave him a questioning look. He squeezed her hand reassuringly, but said nothing. My mother, who had been engaging Stephanie in conversation about her new job in Chicago, immediately squeezed in next to Jason when she noticed he'd returned. I watched them intently as Mrs. Garcia and her staff began serving dinner, my favorite dishes that I'd specifically requested. Butternut squash ravioli with sage butter sauce, roasted vegetable salad with goat cheese, freshly baked herb bread still warm from the oven. Under normal circumstances, I would have been in culinary heaven, but now the knot of anxiety in my stomach left little room for appetite. As everyone began eating and conversation flowed around the table, I saw my mother lean in close to Jason. Her voice was low, but in a momentary lull in the ambient noise, I caught her words clearly. While everyone's here, go and changed. The rest of her sentence was lost as Nathan burst into laughter at something Abigail had said. Jason nodded discreetly and quietly, excused himself from the table again, avoiding my gaze entirely. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Go and change what? The plans, the surprise, was something being cancelled or altered without my knowledge, and why all the secrecy? I've always had an active imagination, a blessing for my work in creative marketing, a curse for my personal peace of mind. Now it went into overdrive, conjuring increasingly alarming scenarios. Maybe Ethan was breaking up with me and they were trying to soften the blow. Maybe someone was sick, seriously sick, and they were waiting until after my birthday to tell me. Maybe Rachel was planning to crash the party and humiliate me again, and my family was trying to prevent it. The paranoia felt both irrational and entirely justified. After all, I had a history of birthdays gone catastrophically wrong, and my family had a history of keeping secrets for my own good. On my 12th birthday, I'd been blissfully enjoying my party, completely unaware that my parents had already signed divorce papers and were planning to tell me the next day. I'd found out only because I overheard a similar hushed conversation between my mother and aunt. The memory of that betrayal, not the divorce itself, but the secret keeping, still stung 15 years later. Mackenzie Earth to Mackenzie. Stephanie's voice pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. Her brow was furrowed with concern. You okay? You've been staring at your ravioli like it personally offended you. I'm fine, I said automatically, then reconsidered. This was Stephanie, the one person I didn't have to pretend with. I lowered my voice. Actually, no. Something weird is going on. Mom and Jason keep whispering and disappearing, and I definitely heard Mom tell Jason to go and change something. Stephanie considered this taking a sip of her wine. Maybe it's something innocent. A surprise gift delivery. Or maybe Jason spilled something on his shirt and needs to change clothes. Her reasonable suggestions briefly calmed my racing mind. Maybe you're right, I conceded, though the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. I know you have a complicated relationship with surprises, Stephanie said gently, but not all surprises are bad ones. Before I could respond, my mother slid into the conversation with forced brightness, asking about Stephanie's new apartment in Chicago. I played along describing my visit there last month, but I was hyper-aware of my mother's every movement, the way her eyes kept darting to the door. Ethan finally arrived, looking slightly harried but handsome, in a blue button-down that matched his eyes. He carried a bouquet of stargazer lilies, my favorite, and bent to kiss me deeply before taking his seat beside me. I'm so sorry, I'm late, he whispered against my ear. Work crisis. I'll tell you all about it later. His familiar scent and warm presence should have been comforting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. I smiled and introduced him to Brooke, the only person at the table he hadn't met before, but part of my attention remained fixed on the door, waiting for Jason's return. When Mrs. Garcia brought out the birthday cake, a masterpiece of vanilla and raspberry with delicate sugar flowers, Jason slipped back into the room. Something about him seemed different, but in the dim lighting and with my heightened anxiety, I couldn't put my finger on exactly what had changed. Was his hair slightly damp? Had he changed his shirt? As everyone sang happy birthday and I prepared to blow out my candles, I caught Jason checking his phone under the table, his expression changing to one of alarm before he quickly schooled his features back to neutral. Whatever was happening, it was clearly coming to a head. The cake was delicious, light vanilla sponge with tart raspberry filling exactly as I'd requested, but each bite felt like a struggle to swallow past the tightness in my throat. I couldn't stop watching my brother and mother cataloging their every movement, every exchanged glance. Jason kept checking his phone, the blue light illuminating his face in the dimly lit cafe. Each time his expression grew more tense. My mother maintained her social smile, but I knew her well enough to see it didn't reach her eyes. Something was definitely wrong. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked quietly, his hand warm on my knee under the table. "You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. How could I explain my suspicions without sounding paranoid, just taking it all in? But my mind kept circling back to Rachel and my 21st birthday. I'd trusted her completely, then we'd been inseparable since sophomore year of high school, shared every secret, supported each other through breakups and family drama. I never saw the betrayal coming. We'd been at a bar celebrating surrounded by friends when Rachel had clinked her glass for attention. "I'd like to read something special," she'd announced with a smile that in hindsight should have warned me. From her purse, she'd pulled my journal, the one I kept in my desk drawer, the one she must have taken while staying at my apartment the previous weekend. "Dear Diary," she'd begun in a mocking voice. "I can't stop thinking about Michael. I know he's Rachel's brother, but every time he comes over, I imagine what it would be like to kiss him." The memory still made me sick with humiliation. The entries she'd chosen to read aloud were my most private thoughts, not just about my crush on her brother, but about my insecurities, my fears, my darkest moments. And everyone had laughed. Even people I thought were my friends. Later, when I confronted her in tears, she'd been dismissive. "It was just a joke, Mackenzie. Lighten up. Everyone has embarrassing thoughts." But it wasn't a joke to me. It was a violation. And it taught me a harsh lesson about trust that I'd never forgotten. Now, watching my mother and brother exchange another furtive glance, I felt that old, familiar dread creeping up my spine. Were they planning something that would hurt me? Was everyone in on it? Mrs. Garcia announced it was time for birthday speeches, momentarily distracting me from my spiraling thoughts. Stephanie went first, raising her wine glass with a warm smile. "To my best friend of 15 years, she began. Mackenzie, you're the strongest, most resilient person I know. You've weathered storms that would have broken most people, and you've done it with grace. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, and I'm honored to be part of your life." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Abigail spoke next, her usual exuberance tempered with sincerity. "In the 2 years we've worked together, you've been not just a colleague, but a mentor. Your creativity, your work ethic, your compassion, they inspire everyone around you. I'm so grateful we became friends." She raised her glass. "To many more years of friendship and brilliant ideas." Then it was Ethan's turn. He stood looking slightly nervous as he cleared his throat. "Mackenzie," he began, his eyes finding mine. "These past 8 months have been the happiest of my life. You're kind, you're brilliant, you're funny, even when you don't mean to be." This earned a gentle laugh from the table. "I know trust doesn't come easily to you, and I'm grateful every day that you've chosen to trust me with your heart." He raised his glass. "To many more birthdays together." His words should have warmed me, but I couldn't fully absorb them. Not when I noticed Jason and my mother exchanging glances again during his speech. Not when Jason's phone buzzed with another text that made him look alarmed. Not when my mother leaned over and whispered something to him yet again. The room suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. "Excuse me," I murmured, rising from my seat. "I need a minute." In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and tried to control my breathing. My hands shook as I gripped the edges of the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of anxiety on my cheeks or the panic in my eyes. "Get it together, Mackenzie," I whispered to myself. Not every secret is a betrayal. Not everyone is Rachel. I checked my phone, half expecting to find some explanatory text from Ethan or my mother, but there was nothing unusual. Just birthday wishes from colleagues and distant friends who hadn't been invited to the intimate gathering. After splashing cold water on my face and giving myself a stern pep talk in the mirror, I felt marginally more in control. I reapplied my lipstick, took a deep breath, and returned to the party, only to find both my mother and Jason missing from the table. "Where did Mom and Jason go?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice as I returned to the table. Danielle looked up from her dessert. They stepped outside for a minute. Your mom said something about getting some air. Without hesitation, I turned and headed toward the cafe's back patio, ignoring Ethan's questioning look. The cool evening air hit my flushed face as I pushed through the door, scanning the small space lit by string lights. I spotted them immediately, my mother and Jason standing close together near the garden wall, deep in urgent conversation. I caught the tail end of my mother's sentence, "Need to stall her until everything's ready." A surge of anger and hurt washed through me. I strode toward them, no longer caring if I was overreacting. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I'd intended. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, matching expressions of shock on their faces. My mother recovered first, her features smoothing into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mackenzie, sweetheart. We were just discussing." "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't lie to me. You've both been acting weird all night, whispering, disappearing, checking your phones. What are you hiding from me?" Jason ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "Mac, it's not what you think. We just what? What are you stalling me for? What's ready?" The words came out bitter and hurt. "It's my birthday. Why are you two conspiring behind my back?" My mother reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Honey, please, you're overreacting. We're not conspiring against you." "Overreacting," I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been whispering and looking at your phones all night. Mom, I heard you tell Jason to go and change something. And now you're talking about stalling me. What am I supposed to think?" The memory of my 12th birthday crashed over me like a wave. Sitting at the kitchen table the morning after my party, my parents' serious faces as they explained they were divorcing, the slow realization that they'd been planning this conversation for weeks while pretending everything was normal for my birthday. "Is someone sick?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Is Dad okay? Are you moving away? What's so terrible that you have to hide it from me on my birthday?" "Nothing's terrible," Jason said, quickly looking alarmed. "Nobody's sick. It's nothing like that." "Then what is it?" "Because, from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you're keeping secrets for my own good again." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice as I echoed the phrase my parents had used during their divorce. My mother's face fell, hurt flashing in her eyes. "Mackenzie, that's not fair. This isn't anything like that." Jason's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his eyes widened. He exchanged a look with my mother that spoke volumes. "Let me see that," I said, lunging for his phone. "Mac, no." Jason pulled away, holding the phone out of reach. Our scuffle must have been visible through the windows because suddenly Ethan was there, pushing through the patio door with concern written across his face. "What's going on out here?" he asked, looking between the three of us. "Ask them," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "They've been hiding something all night." Ethan put an arm around my shoulders. "Mackenzie, I'm sure there's an explanation. Let's just go back inside and enjoy your party." "No." I pulled away from him. "I want to know what's going on. Right now." Mrs. Garcia appeared at the door, her warm face creased with concern. "Is everything all right out here? The other guests are wondering where the birthday girl went." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Garcia," I said, fighting back tears. "But I think I'm going to end the party early." "Mackenzie, please." My mother began, her eyes filling with tears. "Just wait a little longer. Wait for what I demanded. For whatever secret you're keeping to blow up in my face, no thanks. I've had enough birthday surprises to last a lifetime." Ethan guided me a few steps away from the others, his voice low and gentle. "Mackenzie, I understand you're upset. But is it possible you're letting past traumas color your perception here? Your mom and brother love you. They wouldn't do anything to hurt you." His words, though meant to be comforting, felt like a betrayal. "You don't understand," I said, pulling away from him too. "You don't know what it's like to have your trust broken over and over." "You're right, I don't," he conceded. "But I also know that not everyone is Rachel or Mark. Sometimes people deserve the benefit of the doubt." Stephanie appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. "What's going on? Everyone's wondering where you went." "They're hiding something from me," I said, gesturing toward my mother and Jason. "They've been whispering and acting strange all night." Stephanie approached me carefully as one might approach a wounded animal. "Mackenzie, I know you've had reasons to be distrustful in the past, but maybe this time it's something good. Maybe they're planning a surprise for you." "That's what I'm afraid of," I admitted, my voice small. The last surprise I got on my birthday was being dumped via text message. The one before that was having my private journal read aloud to a room full of people. Forgive me if I'm not enthusiastic about birthday surprises anymore. Mrs. Garcia brought out a tray of dessert, clearly trying to salvage the situation. "I've made your favorite creme brulee," she said with a gentle smile. "Why don't we all go back inside and enjoy it?" I looked around at the circle of concerned faces, my mother fighting back tears, Jason looking increasingly stressed, Ethan's patient concern, Stephanie's gentle understanding, Mrs. Garcia's grandmotherly warmth. For a moment, I felt completely alone, surrounded by people who couldn't possibly understand the depth of my fear and suspicion. It was as if I was standing on one side of a glass wall, watching everyone else exist in a world where trust came easily, where people didn't constantly brace themselves for betrayal. Jason's phone rang and he stepped away to answer it, his voice too low for me to hear. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, and something in his expression changed. Now he looked nervous, too. It was too much. Everyone was in on it, whatever it was, and I was the only one in the dark. "I'm sorry," I said, gathering my purse and the few small gifts I'd already opened. "I can't do this. I'm leaving." "Mackenzie, please," Ethan said, reaching for me. "Just wait 5 more minutes." "Why?" "So whatever you're all planning has time to happen." I backed away toward the cafe door. "No thanks." The silence that fell over the patio was deafening. Everyone frozen in a tableau of tension and unspoken words. And then the doorbell of the cafe rang. The doorbell's cheerful jingle shattered the tense silence on the patio. Everyone's heads turned toward the cafe entrance, and I watched a strange ripple of emotions cross their faces: relief, anxiety, anticipation. "What now?" I demanded, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Who is that?" My mother and Jason exchanged another one of those loaded glances that had been driving me crazy all evening. Ethan checked his watch, seeming both nervous and excited. "Mackenzie," my mother began carefully, "there is something we've been keeping from you, but—" I knew it. The vindication of being right did nothing to ease the ache in my chest. "What is it? Just tell me and get it over with." "It's not something we can explain," Jason said, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "It's better if you see for yourself. See what another birthday disaster." My voice cracked on the last word. "No thanks. I've had enough humiliation for one lifetime." Stephanie approached me slowly, her expression gentle but firm. "Mackenzie, I know you're scared, but I've been your best friend for 15 years. Have I ever let anyone hurt you?" She had a point. Stephanie had been the one to help me pick up the pieces after Rachel's betrayal, the one who'd shown up at my door with ice cream and tissues when Mark broke up with me via text. She'd never given me reason to doubt her. "No," I admitted reluctantly. "Then trust me now," she said, offering her hand. "Whatever's happening, I'm right here with you. And if it turns out to be something bad, which I don't think it is, I promise we'll leave immediately and spend the rest of the night cursing everyone's names over margaritas at my hotel." A reluctant smile tugged at my lips despite everything. "You promise. Cross my heart." She made the childhood gesture we'd used since elementary school. I took a deep, shaky breath and nodded. "Fine. But I reserve the right to storm out dramatically if this is something awful." "Noted," Stephanie said with a small smile, linking her arm through mine as we headed back inside. The cafe had fallen oddly quiet. All my guests were seated at the table, but they were watching the entrance with expectant expressions. Even Mrs. Garcia stood nearby, wringing her hands in her apron with a nervous smile. And there, standing just inside the doorway, was a woman I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. "Charlotte," I whispered, hardly believing my eyes. My cousin Charlotte, whom I hadn't spoken to since a family rift shortly after my parents' divorce, stood awkwardly in the cafe entrance. Her blonde hair was shorter than I remembered, styled in a trendy bob that framed her face. She wore a simple blue dress and a hesitant smile. But what truly caught my attention was the small bundle in her arms, a tiny elderly dog with a bright blue bow attached to its collar. "Hi, Mackenzie," Charlotte said softly. "Happy birthday." I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. Charlotte's presence alone would have been shocking enough. Our families had barely spoken in years after a bitter dispute over my grandparents' will. But the dog. There was something achingly familiar about it that made my heart race. "I don't understand," I said, looking between Charlotte and my mother. "What is this?" Charlotte stepped forward, still cradling the small dog. "This is going to sound crazy," she began, "but do you recognize her?" I looked more closely at the dog, a small, elderly Yorkshire Terrier with gray around her muzzle. She had one ear that stood perfectly straight, while the other flopped forward slightly, and a distinctive white patch on her chest that looked almost like a star. A memory stirred so distant and painful that I'd buried it deep, a much younger version of this same dog wiggling excitedly in my 13-year-old arms. My beloved childhood pet, my confidant during my parents' divorce, my best friend during those turbulent early teenage years. "Daisy," I whispered, hardly daring to hope. "But that's impossible." "Daisy disappeared when I was 14. That was 13 years ago." Charlotte nodded, tears in her eyes. "It's her, Mackenzie. I know it sounds incredible, but it's really her." My legs felt suddenly weak, and Ethan was quickly at my side, guiding me to a chair. I sank into it, my eyes never leaving the small dog. How, I managed to ask. Where she was gone. We looked everywhere. My mother knelt beside my chair, taking my hand in hers. "Charlotte found her by complete chance," she explained gently. "She was visiting old neighbors from our street last month and mentioned she was related to us. The neighbors told her they'd moved away shortly after we did and had taken in a stray dog. They'd found a Yorkshire Terrier with a unique ear and white star on her chest. They'd tried to find the owner, but never could. They kept her all these years," Charlotte continued, "but they're elderly now and moving to a retirement community that doesn't allow pets. They were heartbroken about having to find her a new home. When Charlotte mentioned she was your cousin, they showed her old photos of the dog from when they first found her. She recognized Daisy immediately from family pictures. We didn't want to tell you until we were absolutely sure," my mother said, squeezing my hand. Charlotte arranged for a DNA test to compare with the hair samples we still had from Daisy's old brush. The results came back yesterday. It's her sweetheart. It's really Daisy. I stared at the elderly dog, afraid to believe, afraid to hope. But she disappeared. We put up posters everywhere. We searched for months. "We think she must have wandered far from home and gotten lost," Jason explained. "The neighbors who found her lived about 2 miles away. They said they found her thin and frightened with no collar. It must have fallen off." Charlotte stepped closer, gently lowering the small dog into my lap. "She's old now, of course. The vet says she's probably about 16. But she's healthy for her age." The moment the little dog settled in my lap, she looked up at me with cloudy but alert eyes. And then, as if no time had passed at all, she let out a small, familiar whine, the same sound she used to make when she wanted me to scratch behind her ears. My hands trembled as I gently stroked her soft fur. "Daisy," I whispered. "Is it really you, girl?" On instinct, I made the unique whistle pattern I'd taught her as a puppy, 2 short notes followed by 1 long one. Her one good ear perked up immediately, and she tilted her head in the exact way I remembered. Something broke open inside me. Tears I'd been holding back all evening, years of disappointment, betrayal, and loss, suddenly poured down my cheeks. I gathered the small dog closer, burying my face in her fur as sobs shook my body. "It's her," I managed between tears. "It's really her." As I held Daisy in my arms, the entire evening suddenly made sense. The whispered conversations, the secretive texts, my mother telling Jason to go and change into clean clothes after picking up Charlotte and Daisy from the hotel where they'd been waiting. "This is why you were acting so strange?" I asked, looking up at my mother and Jason through tear-blurred eyes. "You were arranging this surprise." My mother nodded, her own eyes shining with tears. "We've been working on it for weeks. Charlotte contacted me out of the blue with this incredible story, but we didn't want to get your hopes up until we were absolutely sure. I was late because I was picking them up from the airport," Jason explained. "Charlotte's flight was delayed, and we were panicking about ruining the surprise. And Mom told you to go and changed." Jason chuckled. "I'd been sitting in my car with Daisy for almost an hour waiting for Charlotte's flight to land. Mom wanted me to change into clean clothes before coming back to the party. Dog hair everywhere. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture not of betrayal but of an extraordinary act of love." I looked at Charlotte, who stood awkwardly to the side. "You did all this, even after everything that happened between our families?" Charlotte shrugged, a sad smile on her face. "Family feuds are stupid. When I realized it might be your Daisy, none of that other stuff mattered. I remembered how much you loved her. Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks as the magnitude of their efforts hit me. For weeks they had coordinated this incredible reunion. Charlotte tracking down the dog's medical records, arranging DNA tests, coordinating with my mother, and Jason flying across the country with an elderly dog just for my birthday. Daisy nuzzled against my hand, her cloudy eyes fixed on me with what seemed like recognition. Despite her age, she still had the same distinctive mark on her ear that I remembered, a small nick from when she'd caught it on a rosebush as a puppy. And the white star-shaped patch on her chest was exactly as I remembered, though now surrounded by more gray than tan. "We have proof it's her," my mother said, gently pulling out her phone. "The DNA test results plus photos from the family who had her all these years. They took wonderful care of her, Mackenzie. They loved her too." I scrolled through the photos my mother showed me Daisy through the years, clearly well-loved and cared for. There she was on a family sofa in a little doggy sweater at Christmas, playing in a sunny backyard. A life parallel to mine when I'd thought she was gone forever. When Daisy disappeared, I said softly, stroking her silky ears, it was right after the divorce. She was the only one who understood how much I was hurting. I used to tell her everything. I looked up at my mother. When she vanished, it felt like the universe was taking away the last bit of stability I had. My mother wiped away a tear. "I know, sweetheart. We looked everywhere for her. I still remember you crying yourself to sleep for weeks. That's why we wanted this to be perfect," Jason added. "We knew what it would mean to you." I remembered the hours spent making posters, walking the neighborhood, calling Daisy's name, checking local shelters week after week. The gradual loss of hope as days turned into weeks, then months, with no sign of her. And I ruined the surprise by freaking out, I said, embarrassment washing over me as I recalled my behavior earlier. "No," Ethan said firmly, kneeling beside my chair. "You reacted based on your experiences. That's completely understandable." I looked at him with fresh eyes, suddenly understanding his role in all this. "You knew too." He nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "Your mom told me last week. That's why I was late tonight. I was helping coordinate with Jason when Charlotte's flight was delayed. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you." "And the text you got outside?" I asked, remembering how he'd checked his phone and his expression had changed. "From Jason," he confirmed, letting me know they had arrived. I turned to Stephanie, who was watching the scene with tears in her eyes. "Did you know too?" She shook her head. "Not until tonight. Your mom told me when you went to the bathroom. That's why I tried so hard to get you to stay. I knew it would be worth it." I looked around the room at all the faces, watching me, my mother, Jason, Ethan, Stephanie, Charlotte, even Mrs. Garcia, and my work friends. All of them had been part of this elaborate plan to reunite me with my beloved childhood pet. Not to humiliate or hurt me, but to heal an old wound I'd carried for 13 years. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, overcome with emotion. "Thank you all so much." "Don't thank us yet," Charlotte said with a small smile. "There's one more thing." She handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a letter from the elderly couple who had cared for Daisy all these years, explaining how they'd found her, their unsuccessful attempts to locate her owner, and how much joy she had brought to their lives. They expressed their gratitude that Daisy could spend her final years with her original family and hoped I wouldn't think badly of them for not finding me sooner. Also in the envelope were official adoption papers already filled out with my name. Daisy was officially mine again. "They wanted you to have these," Charlotte explained, "and they asked if you might send them photos occasionally. They miss her terribly, but knew this was right." I nodded through my tears, unable to speak. Daisy had settled comfortably in my lap, her small body warm against mine, her breathing slow and steady. It felt like the closing of a circle, the healing of a wound I'd carried for so long I'd almost forgotten it was there. "I'm so sorry I ruined the party," I said, finally looking around at everyone. "I was so convinced something bad was happening." "You didn't ruin anything," my mother assured me. "We understand why you were suspicious." Besides, Mrs. Garcia chimed in with her warm smile, "The night is still young. We haven't even finished dessert yet." As if on cue, Daisy lifted her head and sniffed the air, clearly interested in the cake crumbs still on the plates. Some things never change. I laughed through my tears, remembering her infamous sweet tooth. She always could smell dessert from a mile away. The tension that had filled the cafe all evening suddenly dissipated, replaced by a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The party resumed with renewed energy. Glasses were refilled, dessert was served, and the playlist switched to upbeat songs that had everyone smiling. As I sat with Daisy contentedly curled in my lap, watching my friends and family laughing together, I realized something profound. My suspicion and fear had almost cost me one of the most beautiful moments of my life. The rest of the evening unfolded with a warmth and joy I hadn't experienced in years. Mrs. Garcia brought out the remainder of the cake, along with a small dish of whipped cream that she placed on the floor for Daisy, who lapped it up with elderly but enthusiastic enjoyment. As everyone resumed their seats around the table, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The tension and secrecy that had colored the earlier part of the evening were replaced with genuine laughter and animated conversation. I kept Daisy cradled in my lap, unwilling to let her go even for a moment, as if she might disappear again. "I still can't believe you pulled this off," I said, looking around the table at the conspirators. "All of you kept this secret so well." "Too well," apparently Jason joked, earning a ripple of laughter. I turned to Charlotte, who sat somewhat awkwardly at the edge of the group. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, not since the ugly family feud that had erupted after my grandparents' deaths. "I can't thank you enough for what you did. Not just finding Daisy, but reaching out to Mom, arranging everything." Charlotte shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "When I realized it might be your dog, nothing else mattered. Family is family, even when we're not speaking." Her words resonated deeply. The cousin, who had once been like a sister to me, who I'd lost touch with over an inheritance dispute that now seemed trivial, had put aside years of estrangement to bring this miracle into my life. "I've missed you," I admitted, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I've missed you too," she replied, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Maybe this can be a fresh start for all of us." My mother nodded, emotion evident on her face. "I'd like that very much." Patricia then proceeded to explain the full story of Daisy's discovery, filling in details I'd missed in the emotional chaos of the reunion. Charlotte was visiting her old college roommate in Portland, who happened to live next door to the Hendersons, the couple who found Daisy. When she mentioned being from our hometown, they got to talking about neighbors they'd known, and somehow our family came up. Mrs. Henderson mentioned they had a dog they'd found as a stray around the same time we moved away, Charlotte continued. She didn't think anything of it until she showed Charlotte a photo album, and there was this Yorkshire Terrier with one floppy ear and a white star on her chest. "Charlotte called me immediately," my mother said. "At first, I thought it was too incredible to be true. Daisy would have to be quite elderly by now, and what were the chances? But when she sent me the photos, we decided to get a DNA test to be absolutely sure," Jason added. "We still had Daisy's old brush with her fur in it. The results were conclusive. It's definitely her." "The Hendersons are moving to an assisted living facility that doesn't allow pets," Charlotte explained. "They were heartbroken about finding Daisy a new home. When they learned you were her original owner, they were overjoyed. They said it felt like fate." Stephanie, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "Mackenzie, I have to ask. Do you see now how your defensiveness almost cost you this moment? I'm not blaming you," she added quickly, "but I've watched you build these walls for years, always expecting the worst from people." Her gentle observation struck a chord. I looked down at Daisy, peacefully snoozing in my lap, and felt a wave of shame wash over me. I almost ruined everything, I admitted quietly. "If you hadn't convinced me to come back inside—" "But you did come back," Ethan said, his hand warm on my shoulder. "That's what matters. You were scared, but you found the courage to trust again, even for a moment. That's huge, Mackenzie. I've spent so many years expecting betrayal," I said, the realization dawning on me fully. After Rachel, after Mark, after so many disappointments. I started seeing threats everywhere, even from the people who love me most. My mother reached across the table to take my hand. "Sweetheart, none of us blame you for that. You've been hurt badly more than once. But maybe this can be a turning point." Mrs. Garcia, who had been quietly listening, spoke up with grandmotherly wisdom. "When we expect the worst, we often miss the best that life has to offer. Trust is a risk, yes, but a life without trust is a life half-lived." Daisy stirred in my lap, looking up at me with her cloudy but loving eyes, and I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of the tight knot of suspicion I'd carried for so long. "I don't want to be that person anymore," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "The one who's always waiting for the other shoe to drop, who can't accept a beautiful moment without looking for the catch." "It won't change overnight," Stephanie cautioned gently. "Healing takes time. But recognizing the pattern is the first step," Ethan added, his smile warm and encouraging. As the evening wound down, we moved to the comfortable couches in the cafe's lounge area. Daisy explored her new surroundings with cautious curiosity, never straying far from my side. Despite her age, she still had the same inquisitive spirit I remembered from her puppy days. Abigail, Nathan, and Danielle, who had witnessed the entire emotional drama unfold, approached me with warm smiles. "This has been the most beautiful birthday party I've ever attended," Abigail said, wiping away a tear. "Like something from a movie." "Thanks for letting us be part of it," Nathan added sincerely. Danielle knelt to gently pet Daisy. "I understand now why the journal meant so much to you. And why you stopped keeping one." I nodded, remembering how journaling had been my refuge during my parents' divorce with Daisy as my only confidant. After Rachel's betrayal, I'd never been able to trust my thoughts to paper again, too afraid of having my vulnerability exposed. "Maybe I'll start again," I said, glancing at the beautiful leather-bound journal Danielle had gifted me earlier. Some stories deserve to be recorded. As the night drew to a close, guests began to depart with warm hugs and promises to check in tomorrow. Charlotte hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm so glad we found each other again, too." Mrs. Garcia refused payment for the party, insisting it was her gift to see such a beautiful reunion. "In 30 years of hosting events in this cafe, I've never witnessed anything quite so special," she said, her eyes twinkling. Finally, it was just Ethan, Daisy, and me walking home under a canopy of stars. The night air was cool and fresh, and Daisy trotted happily between us, occasionally stopping to investigate an interesting scent. "I'm sorry I doubted you," I said softly to Ethan. "When you were late when you got that text, I immediately assumed the worst." "You don't need to apologize," he assured me. "But I hope you know now that I would never betray your trust. Not ever." "I'm starting to believe that," I said, and realized with surprise that it was true. "It's scary, though. Letting those walls down." "Most worthwhile things are a little scary," he replied with a smile. "Hey, speaking of scary things, are you ready for one more surprise?" I felt a momentary flicker of the old anxiety, but consciously pushed it aside. "Yes," I said, making a deliberate choice to trust. "I am." From his pocket, he pulled out 2 tickets. "Your favorite band is doing a small acoustic show next month. Front row seats. I've been holding on to these for weeks." The joy that flooded through me was untainted by suspicion or fear. Just pure, simple happiness. "Ethan, that's amazing." As we reached my apartment building, Daisy seemed to recognize it, somehow eagerly pulling toward the entrance, as if she remembered this was home. "She knows," I said wonderingly. "After all these years, she still knows where she belongs." That night, as I lay in bed with Daisy, curled up beside me, her small warm body fitting perfectly in the crook of my arm, just as she had 13 years ago, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of this birthday. What had begun as an attempt to break my birthday curse had become something far more significant: a healing of old wounds, a reconnection with family, and perhaps most importantly, a first step toward dismantling the defensive walls I'd built around my heart. I realized that in my determination to protect myself from hurt, I'd also been blocking out joy, connection, and the beautiful surprises life sometimes has in store. The very defenses I'd constructed to keep pain at bay had become a prison, keeping me isolated and suspicious even among those who loved me most. As Daisy's gentle snoring filled the quiet room, I made a silent promise to myself to work on approaching life with more openness, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to recognize when past traumas were coloring my present and perceptions. It wouldn't be easy, and there would undoubtedly be setbacks along the way. But the alternative, a life spent always waiting for betrayal, was no longer acceptable. Sometimes, the things we fear most, vulnerability, trust, opening our hearts, are the very things that lead to our greatest moments of joy. And sometimes, when we least expect it, the universe returns to us something precious we thought was lost forever. Thank you all for watching this story of my unexpected birthday reunion. Have you ever had a moment where your suspicion almost cost you something beautiful? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes good surprises do happen. Remember, it's never too late to heal old wounds and open your heart to trust again. Until next time, this is Mackenzie and Daisy, grateful for second chances.